You're watching NRA TV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Los Angeles, California Live. I'm Bill Whittle, sitting in for Hot Mike, who's had a minor catastrophe today. Turns out it was his birthday party on Santa Monica Pier, and he had a bunch of friends invited over. He'd laid out this tremendous sushi spread. He had to go back to the car to pick up some arugula, and by the time he came back, somebody had taken all of it and used it for bait. He's heartbroken. I don't think we'll probably see him until Monday, to be honest with you. He's really quite upset. Today, we would like to talk about the difference between conservatives and Republicans. And this is a subject that could take, I don't know, we could do hours and hours and hours and days and days and days on this. But what do I mean by conservatives versus Republicans? Well, I know, like almost all of you, certainly virtually all of you, we've watched the last 8 or 9 years with this sense of dread and growing concern because of essentially the commandeering of the American healthcare system. Everybody knows that the Democrats admitted it. They admit it behind closed doors. We have them on kind of hidden video admitting that the purpose of Obamacare, when it was rammed through the Congress in 2009, the purpose of it was to be a front step into single-payer healthcare. Single-payer healthcare is National Health Service and so on. And the situation in Great Britain with Charlie Guest Charlie Gard rather is an indication that we don't want to go to a place where the government gets to decide what kind of treatment you get, if you get treatment, and even if you can take your children out of the hospital so they can either get treatment from a third party or go home to die peacefully. We don't want our lives in the hands of a bureaucracy. And this is why the Obamacare repeal is not just it's not just a piece of an agenda that has to be accomplished. It's the agenda. It's the entire philosophy of the agenda. Does the government own the people, or do the people own the government? Which one is it? And if it turns out that the government controls your health care, then they have literally got their finger on the button over your life and death. And this is why we fight. This is why the Tea Party movement came out of essentially out of nowhere, and people who had never been involved in politics in any way, shape, or form whatsoever suddenly find themselves going to rallies, and they're driving across country, and they're setting up signs because they understood that Obamacare was in fact the foot in the doorway to this national health care service that the progressives always want. And by the way, the reason that the progressives want a national health service is exactly the same reason that we don't want a national health service. They love the idea of having the government and bureaucrats in charge of everybody else's life, and they love the fear that it inspires when everybody's dependent on them. Because when everybody's dependent on the government, you vote for more government. And guess who's going to be the winner in that outcome? So that's basically the stage. The other issues, but let's just concentrate on that one. What happens? Well, Obamacare is pushed through the House and the Senate using all of these, they're just conjuring tricks. Things like something was not voted on, but it was deemed to have passed, and so on. So without a single Republican vote, with their Democratic majority of the House and the Senate and the presidency in the first 2 years of Obama's term, they rammed this thing down the throat of the American people. Many people on the progressive side of the aisle, whether they say it publicly or privately, they said that they knew that Obamacare was going to essentially destroy private insurance, and it basically has. And when private insurance wasn't functioning anymore and the system collapsed, they'd say, see, what have we got? We've got nothing else we can do except go to National Health Service kind of healthcare like in Canada or Britain. So since 2009, the American people realized what was going on. Large numbers of them rose up in an actual grassroots effort called the Tea Party, whose primary focus was to repeal this intrusion into our lives. The fact that the government can make you buy something that you may not want to buy or you can't afford, it's disgusting and disgraceful. And over the last 7 years, we've watched premiums get higher and higher and higher, and the choices get smaller and smaller and smaller obviously Democrats care more about cars than they do for people, because my car, if my car wants to buy insurance, my car has 200 choices. My car gets to decide whether it's going to be what level plan it wants, it's going to determine how much coverage, going to determine all of that stuff. I have 2 choices, 3 choices. The Obamacare exchanges are going out of business, and things are basically collapsing all around. We all know this. So, what's the difference between Republicans and conservatives? Conservatives understand the principle about Obamacare repeal. They understand that this is not just legislation. This is a theory of how to run our lives. And we see what happens when the state runs people's lives. And we used to know what happened when we ran our own lives. This is not a joke, and it's not a little item to be checked off the list. It's the entire reason that we're here. So, looking back at history, they rammed this through in 2009. What's his name? I can never remember this guy's name. The Raging Cajun. Oh, good Lord. I've almost got him. Carville, James Carville. The night Obama's elected, James Carville says this is the beginning of 40 years of uninterrupted Democratic control. Turns out he was only off by 38 years. So the next election after Barack Obama is elected, and after Obamacare, the next cycle, 2010, huge numbers of people came out and flipped the House. Huge, huge win for Republicans. Now, the Democrats don't own all 3 houses, including the presidency. They don't own the House, they don't own the Senate, and they don't own the presidency. They own the Senate and the presidency, but you need all 3. That was 2010. So that was our ability to basically stop them from doing more unilateral damage. Now, obviously, if you're going to repeal this monstrosity, you need the House and you need the Senate at least. So, in 2014, we give the Republicans the Senate. Now they have the ability to send repeal legislation to the president. And they do. And he vetoes it. And they sent a repeal bill something like 30 or 40 times during the time since 2010, some insane number of times that Republicans voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And it couldn't be passed. That repeal could not pass because Barack Obama continued to veto the bill. And everybody knows it. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows it. The Democrats knew it. We knew it. The Republicans knew it. Everybody knew that if we're going to get rid of this Affordable Care Act monstrosity, we need all 3. We need the House of Representatives, we need the Senate, and we need the presidency. So guess what, America? Last year, we gave the Republicans all 3. We gave them what the Democrats had in 2008. You've got the House of Representatives, you've got the Senate, and you've got the presidency. You've got a slim majority in the Senate, but you got enough. So what happens? Well, many of the Republicans who constantly voted for repeal, it turns out, many of these people suddenly don't vote for repeal anymore. And the reason they don't vote for repeal anymore is because now it could actually happen. It could actually happen. So they just basically chickened out because they don't want to face the consequences of it. So now we talk about the difference between Republicans and conservatives. Because this is it. A Republican, apparently, can occasionally be a conservative, but not necessarily. A Republican is a politician, and a politician acts on a set of morals and standards that are quite unique among the population. Politicians treat re-election the same way that you and I would treat being stuck in the Hanoi or in Saigon watching the last helicopter on the roof. When you watch politicians go through the backflips they need to go through in order to be re-elected, they look like they're struggling to get onto the last helicopter out of Saigon. I mean, they will do anything. It's life or death for them to maintain their office. I don't understand this. And I know that you don't understand it either. We can't understand why people have to have these jobs. Well, the reason they have to have these jobs is because it's power and it's authority that they usually did not have in the real world. Donald Trump being a major exception to that. Barack Obama, prior to getting into politics, was a street lawyer. He was handing out forms in Chicago. Now he's president of the United States of America. And you can take that exact same kind of motivation and apply it to virtually everybody who gets into politics in this country. And so what the practical result of this is twofold. First of all, it means that the Democrats get the best liberal minds because, I should say progressives. Progressives and leftists believe in the state. So the smartest progressives and the leftists go into government because that's where they perceive all the power to be. I personally think they go into government because they can't succeed in business, but that may be a prejudice that I hold. Conservatives, on the other hand, feel that politics is something that should just get out of the way. The job of the government is pave the roads, build us a navy, protect us from the British, build us an army to stop those warlike Canadians from coming back down again, and basically leave us alone. So our best minds go into business, and they go into military, and they go into these other fields. So we're at a disadvantage there. But ultimately, I've come to realize that when you really get down to brass tacks, what you find is that the huge majority of people who go into politics do it for this personal aggrandizement. They don't understand anything about conservative philosophy, or if they do, they're certainly not married to it, certainly not married to it above their job. I could list, four people. There may be more, but I can count four that I think really understand these principles and are willing to fight for them. That'd be Ted Cruz, Trey Gowdy, Jason Chaffetz, and probably Louis Gohmert. Those four at least I have watched with my own eyes on television, standing up for American principles and against corruption. So I know those four guys get it. But the huge majority of them don't. They don't understand it. They don't understand it, and they don't care to understand it. So what the end result of all of this goat rodeo is pretty much this. You have one party, which is called the Democratic Party, which believes in big government, more control, more spending, everything else. Opposing them, you have the Republican Party, which believes in slightly less big government. We want to spend slightly less than the Democrats, and we want just a little bit fewer regulations than the Democrats. And while the Democrats may want to take us $20 trillion into debt, the Republicans only want to take us, $16 trillion into debt. See the difference? See the incredible difference between these two parties that we've got here? This is the difference between Republicans and Democrats. But what we really deal with in this country is the difference between progressives and conservatives. So why aren't there any Republican conservatives? Well, for the reasons I just said. The best minds in conservative minds go into business or other fields. And one of the most interesting stories of all is the story of the great conservative icon Ronald Reagan, who started out as a Democrat, was a liberal, big liberal, Hollywood actor, Hollywood celebrity, who figured it out, much as I did. I was a lot more liberal when I was younger. Most people are. But Ronald Reagan figured it out. He wasn't born this way. He was born with the moral core, and he was born with the sense of honor and integrity. But the politics, he didn't know anything about that. He's a leading man in Hollywood. All he knows is communism. So he starts to inform on the communists, which means the left hates him. But Ronald Reagan became Ronald Reagan. He became the Ronald Reagan we know when he did this tour for General Electric. General Electric sent him around the country, I think in a bus, and he would just speak to people on behalf of General Electric. Hey, we've got this famous face, Ronald Reagan. He's a nice looking guy. General Electric pays him to go around. And for a couple of years, Ronald Reagan went out and spoke to people one-to-one. And he learned what they were dealing with. He listened to them. He learned their problems. He got the common sense from the American people. And since he had so much time, he would sit there and he would start to write out this philosophy. He learned how to become Ronald Reagan. And that's why Ronald Reagan was such a great Republican and a conservative. He understood these things before he got elected. And since he was a movie star, he didn't need to be elected. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about this difference between conservatives and Republicans, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of different issues that are on the table right now that make a lot of sense when you look at them this way. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mic Show on NRA TV.
1 second, nothing is going on. The next second, the Quick Trip's on fire, the meat market's on fire,
In 2009, my husband was murdered right in front of me by a man who was stalking me.
She was still waiting for her permit to be approved long after New Jersey's 30-day waiting period had passed.
Even a stable society like America's is really on a razor's edge.
Our history is that we've always utilized and exercised our right to bear arms because it's been life or death.
When a criminal starts misusing me, I am going to use whatever necessary to get that criminal off my back.
A firearm is the only thing that gives me a fighting chance.
Gun laws that only apply to the law-abiding citizens. How can that be right?
We don't trust our soldiers stateside, carry weapons on military bases. I mean, that's insane.
It doesn't say the right of the property owner to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It is the right of the people. So yes, it applies to all of us.
You've been warned. You might learn something.
Your determination to defend individual freedom, joined with the other issues at the very heart of this race, ensured that only one candidate could receive the approval of the American people, Donald Trump. The disgraceful media attempted to manipulate your emotions. They tried to suppress your enthusiasm, your speech, your vote. But you would not be distracted from the core freedom that was truly at stake. And for that, you deserve the gratitude of the entire nation. You proved the founders right, that the ultimate check and balance in this country is the American people.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Hot Mic Show. I'm Bill Whittle from Los Angeles, coming to you live. And today we're talking about the difference between conservatives and Republicans. And one of the stories that was very, very alarming to me came out just a couple days ago when Eric Cantor, who you may remember is one of the Republican stalwarts who was leading the charge for repeal. He was one of those guys who was saying, we got to repeal this abomination of the Affordable Care Act. A couple days ago, Eric Cantor, who's been out of office for quite a while now, 4 or 5 years, I think 3-4 years at least, Eric Cantor said he knew that this bill could not be repealed. He said he knew it. And he said other members of the Republican Party knew it too. Back as early as what, 2013, 14, somewhere in there, 12, something like that. He said we knew it couldn't be repealed, but we were raising a lot of money by promising to repeal it. Folks, when you hear forget about politicians breaking their promise. I'm not going to waste your time with this. This is as old as civilization. But just think about this for a second. If what he is saying is that this bill cannot be repealed because of the political fallout or whatever the case may be, then that means not only do we not have a republic anymore, we don't have a democracy anymore. My friends, we don't even have a tyranny anymore, because if you are basically saying that this law now has so much inertia that it simply cannot be stopped, what you are saying now is that the federal government is a runaway train going down a very steep hill and no one can stop it. No one can stop it. If it turns out that this bill cannot be repealed, then why do we even have representatives? What's the point? Why do we even have them in Congress? Why? I don't know. I don't get it. Of course it can be repealed. And when Cantor says we knew it wasn't going to be repealed, but we were raising money anyway, this is the problem. If I was elected a representative or a senator from the state of California, I know that's unlikely, but maybe I move someplace sensible, and I say I'm going to repeal this bill, then I'm going to repeal the bill. And the reason I'm going to vote to repeal the bill is because I do not want to be a damn politician. I don't want the job. I don't want it. I would rather stay and have fun and do work that's more fun and more honorable and more interesting and more creative. But if I thought the situation was so desperate that I had to go to Washington to stop this thing as a representative, and I say I'm going to vote to repeal this bill, I'm going to vote to repeal it. And if it costs me my reelection, then I will say thank you very much. I look at going to Congress the way you would look at jury duty. It's a duty, it's a civic obligation that I have to fulfill for my country as a way of returning all of the things my country's done to me, but I want to make it as quick as possible. I want to do 2 years, get the hell out of there, come back home. That's how the country was supposed to be run. That's the design. It's supposed to be citizen legislatures. So when you hear somebody like Eric Cantor say this bill cannot be repealed, he's telling you that we not only don't have a Republican government or a conservative government, what he's saying is we don't have a government. We don't. We can't control it. It's too big for us. Too big, too massive, moving too fast. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us someplace here, I think. It leaves us with a sense that we have got to find a different kind of people. Now, I know you've been hearing this forever. People saying we got to find different candidates. We don't have to find different candidates. We have to find a different kind of candidate. We have to find different people. And we have to basically go at them and say, listen, I know you don't want this job. By the way, if you find a candidate for Congress and you're convinced that person does not want the job, really doesn't want the job, that's exactly the person that you want. And if it turns out the person kind of secretly does want the job, you need to let them go, and that's not the kind of people you want. You need to find people who don't want the job. And you need to especially to find people who can explain this stuff. There's nothing in any of this that's difficult to explain. Nothing. There's nothing about conservative principles that's particularly sophisticated, nothing about it that's particularly complicated. That's why they work. That's why they work. I say this quite a bit now because I think it's really true. It dawned on me fairly lately. Look, when I was in my 20s, I was a thoroughly unpleasant person. And one of the reasons I was so unpleasant was because I was so obsessed with intelligence and how smart I was and showing everybody how smart I was. I've gotten a lot wiser since then. But one of the things I've realized over time is simply this. Any idiot can make things more complicated. It takes a genius to make things simple. And this government, this idea of government, is simple. It's very simple. They went to a lot of trouble to make it simple. So why can't we just send people who understand the basics and have them go and do their job and come home? What's the difference between conservatives and Republicans? Well, Republicans are politicians. Conservatives are patriots and citizens. And some of us are philosophers. Well, that's not true. Actually, I'm not a philosopher. I'm simply a messenger. I simply talk to people about what exists. We're not talking about Whittleism here. We're not talking about some new economic policy that I've thought up. On the contrary, my job is to simply say, all of this stuff works. It's worked since we've been a country. It's worked great. Why are we messing around with it? We can see that it's destroying the country. What's the matter with you people? Well, the matter with these people is that people want to be politicians, and even our people want to be politicians. So you get, I forget her name now, as one example among many, this senator from Alaska who was saying, oh, we must repeal this. It's a terrible bill. For the entire time that she's been elected, we must repeal this bill. And then finally we have a vote for repeal. Last week, she votes against repeal. Or Maverick John McCain, who is very fond of the spotlight, I've noticed. And by the way, so is James Comey, who's got a book coming out. You see what I mean? See what I mean? Does the FBI director need to be the kind of person who enjoys being in the spotlight and is looking forward to his multi-million-dollar book deal coming out? Is that the kind of person that we want running the federal law enforcement agency, premier law enforcement agency in the world? Is that what we want? Because if it were me, and if I was looking for somebody to fill the job of FBI director, what I would be looking for is I'd be looking for somebody who was trying to be as invisible and as anonymous as possible. I'd be looking for somebody who ran from the spotlight like somebody who was just about to catch fire in the sun, like a vampire. I'd want a guy who's focusing his entire attention on his job, which is a tough job and it's a full-time job, and publicity would be anathema to him. It'd be kryptonite to the kind of person I'd want for that job. So, who do we have? Well, we've got two different kinds of people that I think we can count on. One of them are conservative commentators, people like Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity or any of the others, who, like Ronald Reagan, learned these simple principles before they went to office. They learned simple principles before they went to office. Rush Limbaugh is a voice. Glenn Beck is a voice. He understands this stuff. Sean Hannity understands it. And it's not terribly hard. It's just stuff that we just have to understand. Dennis Miller not only understands it, Dennis Miller can put it in such a way that makes you realize how absurd the left actually is. And this is what we have to do. We have to stop finding people who can talk about it, and we have to basically take a gun, a registered firearm, by the way, which we have legally and which we use with great care and regard for safety. But we take one of those firearms and we basically walk up to one of these guys and say, "Listen, you have to go to Congress, and if anybody says I don't want to go to Congress, that's when you actually chamber around, right? Now you know you got the real deal. Now you know you've got the kind of person that this country not only was based upon but requires. Because if we have an elected priesthood that simply does what is in their personal best interest, that the idea of losing all of the perks and the travel and the status and the bowing and the kowtowing and my good friend, the great senator from the distinguished state of Alaska and all the rest of it, people who can't bear to lose that. You know, I talked to somebody who I admired very much. I got to be somewhat close friends with, I just losing my memory today, Alan West. And Alan West, when he became a congressman, he said, you would go out to dinner with a group of people. They'd invite you out to dinner. And in casual conversation, very offhandedly, what's your favorite kind of drink, Alan? What do you like? Oh, I guess I'm a Glenfiddich single malt guy. And then the next day, on your doorstep, no fooling, on your doorstep, you walk outside, and there's a case of 6 bottles of Glenfiddich, most expensive alcohol you can possibly find. He told me that when he got to Washington, the first thing that happened was they have a freshman representative meeting. And they go to this meeting, and they're all full of fire because they've just been elected. They want to come and change things for the better. Conservatives. And they start to pitch some ideas. And then the staff members in the eternal, never-ending, immortal bureaucracy say, well, that's a great idea, Representative, but that's not how we do things here. And my response to that would be, you don't tell me how we do things here. I tell you how we do things here. I'm sent here by the people of Idaho or Florida or California. I have legal authority to be here. You are a secretary who used to have a job here. Now you're fired. Here's how we do things here. That's how we do things here now. See how it works? It's enough to make a grown man hyperventilate. Undoubtedly, more horrors will be in store for us when we come back to you on Monday. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your membership in the NRA, champion of the Second Amendment and rapidly one of the great champions of the First. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mic Show. We'll see you back on Monday.